Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. On today's episode, I am so excited to be discussing one of my favourite reads of 2026. Yes, I can already say that, it's that good. That book is Female Nude by Rhiannon Lucy Coslett. Female Nude centres around Sophie, a painter who is holidaying in Greece with her friends to celebrate her soon-to-be married best friend Helena. Meanwhile, in her personal life, Sophie is grappling with the pressure to have a baby from her partner Greg. Sophie is devoted to her art but is yet to sell her work, and so she finds herself at a crossroads. Is it possible to make art and be a mother? Does she even want to be a mother? This idyllic trip soon spirals out of control, and not one of these people will emerge unscathed. Female Nude is an incredible exploration of what it means to be a woman and an artist. It's the question of motherhood and female friendship, and for long-time listeners, you know how much I love an affair, and this has one of the best I've read. Author of Female Nude, Rhiannon Lucy Coslett, was raised in Wales and is now based in London. Her first novel, The Tyranny of Lost Things, was published by Sandstone Press in 2018. Her much-acclaimed memoir, The Year of the Cat, was published by Headline in 2023, and a collection of her Guardian columns, The Republic of Parenthood, was published by Duck with Books just last year. Rhiannon also reviews fiction for The Guardian, and her journalism has appeared in Vogue, The Observer magazine, Time, and Stylist, to name a few. Her second novel, Female Nude, is out now and published by Tinder Press. And here to chat all about it, welcome Rhiannon to A Pair of Bookends.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely intro. It's so nice to be here.
It's so nice to have you. And I was just telling you how much I love this book, and I really, really did. And I'm so excited to chat to you about it. But before I start, I do like to ask what you're currently reading.
So I'm reading, I don't know if you've read it, it's The Original by Nell Stevens.
I haven't, no.
I'm doing an event with her in Oxford later this month,
Amazing.
and her novel is a historical novel. It's kind of I'd call it like a queer Victorian mystery that
Ooh.
it has the theme of painting running through it, much like Female Nude, although I wouldn't say, they're written in a similar style and they're in a different genre and all that. But there's a kind of link there with the painting theme. So it'll be really interesting to talk to her about art in books. I'm enjoying it so
Yes.
much. I think it's brilliant. I would say if you like Sarah Waters,
Yes.
then you will love this book.
Amazing. I have to hold my hands up and say that I haven't read Sarah Waters yet, which is,
Well,
I
you
know,
must.
I
You
know, it's
must. She's
awful.
brilliant. She's brilliant. But it's a real page-turning mystery, but written beautifully. I mean, she's such a good writer. I've been a fan of Nell's for years, and it's great to see her just get better and better.
Oh, I love that. That's a great recommendation. Now, speaking of good recommendations, we must get into your book, which, as I've said now a million times, I loved it so much. But I'd love to start with your protagonist, Sophie. How did her voice come to you?
Oh, that's a really tricky question because they did a study a few years ago that I contributed to, which was about whether writers hear an inner monologue, whether they hear their characters' voices or whether they kind of create their characters' voices. And I'd say in Sophie's case, her voice kind of came to me fully formed.
Oh,
I
I
just
love
kind of
that.
knew who she was immediately. Um, I knew some of the issues that I really wanted to explore in the book. And I knew that she had to be an artist. She just was an artist. And I knew that she was somebody who was struggling with a kind of feeling of internal class struggle. And I will say that, you know, the environments that I've worked in for many years are quite elitist and they can be quite nepotistic too. So I was sort of familiar enough with that environment to imagine how someone like Sophie might feel to
Yeah.
be in that environment. So I'd say it felt very natural to me, actually.
I mean, I absolutely loved this character, and she is messy and complicated, but she resonated with me so much. I've just hit 31, which is Sophie's 31, isn't she? I think she
Yeah,
is. Yes.
yeah.
And she's sort of at this kind of odd point in her life where she's still wanting to make her art, but then she's also having the question thrown in about becoming a mother and whether she actually wants that, and how will that sort of change this career path that she's chosen. And I think it is such a complicated time, especially for creatives and women that are making art. I would love to start with that sort of question and why you felt that would be such an impossible choice for Sophie.
I think anybody who's wrestled with that question in any way whatsoever, it will be familiar to them, no matter
Mm,
what. You don't necessarily need to be a creative person. I think there's quite a significant level of awareness
hmm.
amongst my generation and younger generations of the sacrifices that motherhood involves.
Yeah,
That's not to say that women of previous generations didn't experience that. We know that they did. And in fact, the women artists that are peppered throughout the novel, we see them having to navigate that too.
yeah,
I think our generation, I think we talk to our mums more. Our mums were honest with us about the things that perhaps they'd have to give up or that they felt that they hadn't been able to pursue because of
hmm,
motherhood. I think also coming of age at a time when teen pregnancy was a big problem in the
yeah,
UK meant that motherhood was framed as this thing that kind of ambitious girls didn't do. And it was something that would ruin your future. And so it became kind of this scary thing, I think. And I certainly found it very difficult to escape that mentality
mm,
as somebody who really wanted to have a baby. But I think often I was kind of coming up with reasons not to do it, like, oh, every baby you have might be a book that you don't write or something like that. Even though I really, really wanted one, I was quite interested in examining the other side of the coin. Like, how would it feel if you were someone who kind of thought, yeah, I really don't want to have a baby, you know? So Sophie's kind of like my antithesis in a way.
love
She
that.
doesn't have that crazy longing that I had. I had real
Yeah,
baby fever at that age, and she doesn't really have that in the same way. But her feelings are still a lot of the same feelings that I think I had about my work and about my art, and that a lot of women I know have had about their work and about their art. I think
yeah,
motherhood feels like more of a choice now, as opposed to something that you just did.
yeah,
And that means that we obsess about it. It's good to think through our life choices, but
hmm,
sometimes I wonder if it acts as a kind of barrier to action, all this
yeah.
thinking,
You,
you know?
you're so right about the how and it's not just creatives, women do have to sacrifice a lot when they become a mother. And I think it does throw up so many questions for us. And I'm the same as you that I have it was like a weird I'm 31 now, but there was like a weird switch that went off, and I've tried to describe it to people, but I find it really hard to. But it felt like a switch went off within me at the age of like 28, where I was like, I really, really like can't describe how much I want this. Like it's not even just like I don't know, it's not like a usual want that I would have. It was like I need to have a baby, but like I just wasn't in a position at the time to have one. And I think it's so interesting to look at the opposite side of that and to see from Sophie's perspective the want to, to not have to not want to have children. And I found it really interesting that you sort of like flipped the narrative, because I think we often hear about, women wanting to have babies and their partner kind of being a bit more reluctant to. We often hear about, men kind of not being at the same age, but they're not being ready to until they're much older, and that sort of dynamic. But in the dynamic with Sophie and her partner Greg, he's the one that's sort of putting the pressure on to have a baby. And I wondered why you wanted to sort of toy with that dynamic a little bit. Was it a kind of conscious thing, or did it just kind of happen?
I think like it does happen the other way around. Maybe we don't hear about it as much,
Yeah,
but I think one of the things about Sophie and Greg's relationship is that Greg wouldn't have to give anything up in
yeah,
becoming a father in the same way that Sophie would. And there's obviously a class dynamic that's playing out there as
mhm,
well, which is that like Greg in many ways offers Sophie a kind of financial stability that as an artist she would not have if she were single. And so she's weighing that up against this, do I have a baby question as
mm,
well.
yeah,
'Cause she can kind of choose to not have a baby, but that means ending her relationship, and that means perhaps giving up, I don't state this so explicitly, but perhaps giving up her chance of being a homeowner. It means giving up a certain kind of middle class acceptability, the 2.5 children and the house in the suburbs and the professional jobs that, people seem to really value still, even in this day and age. versus a career choice that perhaps would not have been the most accepted or natural choice for her coming from her background. I mean, she's
Hmm.
got supportive parents, but they're not like, they don't necessarily completely understand the art world and what she's chosen to kind of embark upon. So it's so many things that are going through Sophie's mind. And of course there is a hormonal aspect to it. And I can remember saying to my editor, I want to write the great ovulation novel. You know, and I think that's something that's happening with Sophie is that sometimes what your body chooses is not what your rational mind might choose. And
Mm,
sometimes the partner that your body chooses isn't the partner that your rational mind might choose. And I think that's something that we all kind of know in our bones, but we don't talk about that much
yeah,
still.
we definitely don't. And I do really want to return to the class element in a moment, but you mentioned earlier about how you do this incredible thing where between each chapter you show Sophie sort of throughout her life engaging with different female and non-binary artists that have also grappled with the choice or the sort of lack of choice to have children and how that's impacted their art. Could you tell us a bit about your choice to include their stories?
So I'd say I've been thinking about the female nude for like, well, I think we all think about it from quite an early age because the first kind of female nude we see when we're infants is usually looking up at our mother's bodies.
Hmm.
And then obviously we grow up in a society that's saturated with female objectification and sexualization, particularly in the time that I came of age in the 90s, early 2000s, and where body fascism was particularly unpleasant. And, that's kind of in parallel with the art world, where we're used to seeing these beautiful female bodies in paint, usually painted by men. And those are considered the great paintings often of our age
Mm,
and of history of the canon. So I've always been interested by how women artists have tried to reclaim their own female bodies and how they've kind of rendered that in paint.
yeah.
So it's something that I don't know how it came to me. I studied art history at university, so I was aware of some of these paintings and some of the interactions that Sophie has with artists, interactions that I've had with artists. The way that she engages with art is very much the way that I engage with art, which is that I find it very personal and very
Mm,
emotional. So there were certain works that I studied, and then there were others that I kind of had to look up and find out about because some of these artists still aren't very well known, despite
no.
the fact that they were doing groundbreaking stuff. Like you look at Anne Brigman, she was going off into the Californian desert in 1907, 1908, and you know, and afterwards to take these nude selfies, essentially, these nude self-portraits at a time when to do so was just utterly groundbreaking.
Yeah.
So it was that kind of navigation of the female form and the female body that really interested me, as well as how they'd grappled with these questions of motherhood.
I mean, I loved that you included these stories because some of them I hadn't heard anything about. And I was particularly moved by the story of, is it Alice Neal?
Yeah.
Who it was rumoured that she'd kind of left her baby on the fire escape and she, was criticised for sort of dedicating herself to her art. And, it was perceived that she was choosing art over motherhood. And I think it was it her that her babe one of her babies died and then another one was taken away from her.
Yeah, a baby died, and then another one was taken to South Latin America to live with the father, and they were only really reunited in adulthood. There was an element of choice to that as well. I mean, as I say, these women didn't always make the most loving choices. They weren't always the most loving mothers.
Hmm.
And, there's a discomfort there that you have to grapple with as well. Like how much of your motherhood do you sacrifice at the altar of painting?
Yeah.
For Alice, Neil, painting always came first. That's what her children said. But the fire escape thing was kind of made up by those same in-laws that took the daughter away as a way of sort of smearing her as an unloving mother, which she wasn't an unloving mother. She just didn't always prioritize her motherhood, I suppose.
Yeah,
And that's difficult. Mothers are supposed to prioritize their children above all else all the time.
of course. I wondered if there was a particular story that you wrote about one of these artists that you were particularly struck by or kind of moved by.
I mean, they all mean something to me in different ways. I first encountered Gwen John when I was at school because I grew up in Wales and she is a Welsh artist. And I would have been about 11. I wasn't aware that she'd ever posed nude for Rodin. I wasn't aware that she had painted nudes of herself or of other women. It was much more her kind of, portraits with the high neck blouse looking
Mhm.
very prim and proper. And so it was a bit of a revelation to me when in my 20s I started to read about the affair that she'd had with Rodin and just how miserable it made her. I mean, I
Mhm.
think what's interesting about the Gwen John story is that she was obsessed with this older male artist who was, in many ways, a pervy old man, who ambushed her into a threesome at one point.
Yeah, insane.
And exploited her. At the
Yeah.
same time, he also was always encouraging her to work and always encouraging her to paint and really believed in her abilities as an artist. But she was so obsessed with him that she was like, no, I just want to be your model. I just want to be your muse. And it wasn't until he died when she said, I felt like I'd been unwell and had suddenly got better.
Hmm.
And as I say in the book, I think that's something that we can all empathize with. We've all had crushes or affairs or relationships where it's almost felt like being sick with a disease.
Yeah.
And it isn't until you escape that you return to full health. And she ended up kind of living alone with her cats and painting and reading.
It's iconic,
And
really.
yeah, yeah. And yeah. So I love her. I've always loved Gwen John and I love her story. But they all move me in different
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, I mean there are some really incredible stories in there, and I'm
Mm.
really grateful that you put them in there because I think it was quite an unusual thing to do with the novel, and but I really appreciated it, and I felt like I learned so much about these various artists. I want to come to the obsession element and the sort of crushes and affair situation you were just talking about, because as I said in my intro, this has one of the best affairs I've ever read, and I love an affair in a novel. I don't know why, but I just do. Could you tell us a bit about including this affair between Sophie and Kai and what you sort of feel it tells us about these characters?
I think for me, it was really important that I write a story in which a woman is having sex that she's enjoying.
Yeah.
I think in the kind of Me Too era, there was a very necessary examination of the kind of exploitative, uncomfortable, unenjoyable, sometimes coercive sexual experiences of
Hmm.
young women. And I think that was really important. And in fact, in my first novel, I have scene in which the character is subjected to choking that's non-consensual. So it's not that I'm saying that those books weren't important. They
Yeah.
were really important. At the same time, it had started to depress me
Yeah.
just how much I was reading about this awful, unpleasant sex that young women were having. And I did think, well, there needs to be a bit of a balancing here because good sex, amazing sex is also a
Hmm.
huge part of life. And I don't feel like we're really getting those sides of female desire, particularly
Mm.
how hormones play into that side of female
Yeah.
desire in fiction. And I really, really wanted to do that. So that was kind of my motivation. And I think also writing good sex is a real challenge. And it's one that I kind of wanted to set myself as a writer. As for Kai, I was kind of like, he came to me as a character because when you study art history, you look at Greek myths a lot
Mhm.
because they feature in paintings a lot. And there are lots of Greek myths in which women are disturbed by men when they're bathing and then usually kind of chased after and
Yeah.
sometimes raped. And I was quite interested in kind of turning that on its head, which is why Sophie first sees Kai when he's swimming. She sort of comes across him in a moment that he thinks is private.
Hmm.
But isn't, and she is observing him. And I wanted to write a character who was also very attractive because I think the way that women see men and fancy men's bodies, again, is something that isn't really explored in fiction.
Mm.
I mean, she really fancies him, really,
She
really
really
fancies
does.
him. And, although I hope that I've given him a character, and he is a character, he's a fully formed character, I wanted there to be almost this kind of mythological side to him
Mhm.
where he's almost like a cipher for her desires in the way that so many women have been for male desires for so many years.
Yeah.
So although Kai is a person, there's also, I think, perhaps it helps the reader think about times when they've really fancied someone like that as well.
Mm.
Suzanne Valadon has a painting of men who are fishing. And the way she paints their muscles and their bodies, is very erotic. And I think that erotic side of the male gaze, of the female gaze, see, I even said male gaze because it's such a default. I've really wanted to explore that. And throughout the book, she talks about how he looks and
Mm.
how she feels about how he looks.
Yeah.
And women do look at men that way,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't really know it, would you,
No.
when we talk to each other?
No, but I mean that kind of desire is like all consuming, and I think you've captured that so well, and you do write sex really well.
Oh, thank you.
But I wondered how you find writing sex scenes because I know it's different for every writer.
I mean, I was just very much immersed in the story, so
Yeah,
it came out very naturally. But there's obviously certain words that I like to avoid. You can't be
yeah,
too anatomical, because I think that just kind of ruins it. Do you know what I think actually really helped? Like some writers really don't like the Bad Sex Awards, which I don't think they do it anymore, but they did it for years, and it was always the best party of the year. I always used to try and wangle an invite from the literary review if I could get one. Because what they used to do is they'd get actors to read out the sex scenes that had been nominated.
Stop.
And, everybody would drink champagne and laugh. And it was, probably in some ways horribly elitist. And, some writers would get very upset. But I always really admired the writers who would turn up to accept their awards. I thought, yeah, be a good sport about it, you know? Some of them were like brilliant writers in many
Yeah.
other ways, but they just couldn't write sex. I think it's one of those really difficult things. So I like to think that going to the Bad Sex Awards every year for about a decade helped hone my ability to write sex. I don't know. But I think it will probably will make some readers feel quite uncomfortable as well, because not everybody likes to read sex scenes and
No,
not
they
everybody,
don't.
they get very embarrassed by sex. So I think as a writer, you have to put that to one side and go, I'll just ban my parents from reading this. And then, it doesn't matter so much.
I mean, I'm not one of those people that doesn't like reading about, sex. I want to read it. I want to read about female pleasure. I want to see, women having good sex. I think it's really important, and I don't know why it still feels not revolutionary, but also, yeah, like why does it feel such an amazing thing to read about women having good sex? It's really nice to read about for me. Um,
I think as you get older, you get more comfortable with it as well.
yeah,
I think it's a maturity thing.
yeah.
When you're in your early 20s, you're like, oh my God, cringe, you
God
know?
forbid.
Um, Although I don't know if I read Bad Behavior by Mary Gateskill when I was 14,
Oh
and
wow.
that, has obviously influenced a huge number of
Yeah,
women writers. So yeah, I don't know. I've always liked reading about sex, I think.
yeah, me too. No, you've set this novel in a dreamy location. I was very jealous of these characters, and to an extent, and I really wanted to be there. It's set on a Greek island, and I wondered why here, and also a really important question: if you got to go to a Greek island for research.
So I've been to Greece more times than I can count. And
Love that.
before we had children, my husband and I would always try and go to a different island. And we went to some
Wow.
very, very remote ones, where you're basically on a kind of boat that seems to have been made from a tin can. And there's one taverna and no pharmacy or any phone signal or anything. So I really did get quite off the beaten track in Greece and have quite, experienced quite a bit of the islands at least. There's still so much more to explore there. So it came from a real love of Greece. And also, the mythology side of things, how that
Yeah.
ties in with the mythology, with the art and the archaeology. It's basically the first thing that you study. If you study art history, you start with the Greeks.
Hmm.
So, which isn't right. You shouldn't start with the Greeks, but that's how they do it. Yeah, it's always been a place that's fascinated me. And I don't kind of name the island until very late in the book, but it is a real place and it is one of my favorite islands that I've ever been to. But I didn't write much of the book there. I obviously, the idea of the book came to me while I was there, but the writing itself, I did some of it in Corfu, I did some of it, most of it in London,
Hmm.
and then I finished it in the south of France, which I think helped because I was staying at a friend's house and I had all the crickets singing outside and I had, the smell of the dry pines that is very similar to Greece. And
Mm.
so that kind of helped me get back there.
I
So.
do think the this book is such a sort of sensory experience as a reader. I mean, the food descriptions for one, I was desperate to have some of the food they were eating and the wine they were drinking, and but I think even like visually, you describe everything so well, and you feel like you really get a sense of, all the smells and the tastes, and yeah, everything just seems so like I don't know, alive and visually really satisfying. I don't know if that was a kind of important thing for you as a writer, or does it just kind of come out naturally?
So it was important for me because of what I said before about the fact that, Sophie's at a certain point in her cycle.
Hmm.
And so I wanted taste and smell, those sensory things to feel really strong and powerful. I
Hmm.
think particularly as she's having this huge kind of surge of sexual desire as well.
Hmm.
I think when you're falling in love or when you're embroiled in a really amazing kind of romantic connection with somebody, everything feels more vivid.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of happening to Sophie. But I think it's also the fact that I just really love Greece. I mean, I think it's the best place in the world to go
Oh,
on
it's so
holiday.
beautiful, isn't
I
it?
love everything about it. It's got the best sea for swimming. It's got amazing food. Writing about the food, I was just writing about stuff that I eat when I go to Greece and that I love, you
Mopping
know.
up the tzatziki with the pita bread, I was like, yes.
And there are novels where I read and where I read them, and I just think, yes, but w when do you eat? Are you eating at all? Like,
I'm always thinking about my next meal, so I
I know.
appreciate that.
I know, and I'd had a conversation with another writer, one I kind of really admire a few years ago, and he was listing writers who can really write food. We were trying to come up with writers who really do food well. And I realized that I wanted to be one of them. I wanted to be a writer who could do food well. So I hope I've achieved it.
Oh, you definitely have. Yeah. I was very jealous of the meals they were having. Now I really want to talk about your sort of depiction of female friendship. And I love reading about female friendship. I always say it's such an intense dynamic, and I think it's really interesting specifically at this time in their life that they're at, where you're all sort of going in different directions, you're all kind of making different life choices. And I think sometimes it feels like you maybe don't understand each other as well as you thought you did, or you maybe don't know each other as well as you thought you did. And there was a particular moment that struck me when you write about the difficulty of seeing other women's successes as your own personal failure. Could you tell us a bit about the way you explored female friendship and specifically at this period in someone's life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that period that Sophie's in, where she's in her early 30s, is such a transformative period
Hmm.
in so many women's lives where they're making choices that are kind of going to play out forever for the
Yeah.
rest of their lives. It's a very kind of high stakes moment, or it feels like a very high stakes moment at the time. And so you're seeing somebody, I think, come of age, but also make these choices that you might not necessarily agree with. And that's the case for Sophie and her best friend, Helena, who's getting married.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I kind of hope's quite funny about the novel is that Helena, who was previously a very kind of vocal feminist and quite intellectual and quite kind of fun and wild, has just been completely kind of consumed by her wedding. And
Yes.
it's all that she talks about. And everybody else is bored to death of all her friends are just bored to death of hearing about this wedding. But they love her. And so they kind of humor her to the extent that they're able to.
I think Sophie says
Um,
at one point something like a flower crown, it comes for us all in the end.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So good.
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of us can kind of empathize with, whether it's been us or whether it's been our friends kind of
Yeah.
becoming these bridezillas, I suppose, for lack of a better term. But it's also, I joke, but the person she's chosen to marry has, to use a modern phrase, a lot of red flags.
Hmm.
And so there's that challenge as well, is seeing your friends make choices that perhaps aren't always in their best interests and that
Hmm.
perhaps aren't always going to turn out the best way.
Yeah.
And there's that kind of conflict of it being too late to say anything
Hmm.
and yet wanting to because you can't stand the guy. And at the same time, I think envying the financial stability that your friends have. I mean, there's so much going on under the surface of these friendships.
Yeah.
And a kind of perverse sort of loyalty there as well, which is that Sophie may be being unfaithful to her partner, and her friends may have views about her behavior, but they're not going to dob her in.
No, I find it really interesting that you've explored this friendship where they've gone on this holiday, but this holiday is almost, it's not in the traditional sense that we usually see, but it is a hen party. And I do think hen parties seem to cause so much friction, and I don't know what it is about them that does that. What do you think it is about a sort of hen party that might cause that tension between friends?
I mean, it's weird, isn't it? I've never had a hen party. I've never been to a hen party where
Have
that's
you
happened.
not?
No, I think
Should be grateful.
I've got quite sane friends. I don't know. All the hen parties I've been to have been great, but
Yeah,
maybe that's because my friends are a little bit alternative or they do
yeah.
things a little bit differently. I don't know. I know that people really live in fear of the hen do WhatsApp group
Oh my God.
stuff. Because the women in this novel are sort of a certain social background,
Mhm.
they're trying to do things a bit differently. They're trying to have a sort of chic can do, I suppose,
Yeah,
which is quite ironic considering how things turn out without wanting to ruin it. But I suppose the Hindu thing is that it goes back to the idea of it being quite high stakes to
yeah.
people.
No, it definitely is.
Ultimately, what is a Hindu? I mean, it
What,
doesn't matter, does it?
what are we
But it
doing?
becomes this huge thing in people's minds.
Yeah,
It's the ritual of it, it's the performance of it, it's what does it mean?
yeah.
It's the undercurrents. And I think what I've always found interesting about female friendship and why I love Ferrante so much in her examination of female friendship is that there's always so much going on under the surface.
Mm,
And I suppose the Hindu is a bit of a stage set for all those unexpressed feelings that you bring alcohol into the mix as well, and it can become very explosive. All these repressed things, all these things that people are keeping inside, as Sophie is.
yeah, and it does become explosive. We won't give any spoilers, but
No.
I just think, yeah, it's amazing the way it all ends up. Um, Now, I've got a quote here on sort of realizing the wealth gaps in friendships. And I think you explore class so well, and I think it's a really important thing to talk about. And I'm really glad that you highlighted this. And the quote is, I could see my female friends dissolving before my eyes, their borders merging with the backgrounds of what had slowly and imperceptibly become our lives. The shift had been discombobulating. In our early 20s, despite the differences in our origins, it had been easy to pretend that we were all the same, that our destinies intersected. We all lived the same scrappy ersatz experiences in shared flats and thrift shop clothes, working on various creative projects, sticky taped together through bar and temp jobs. Then the money started making itself known. There had been hints of it before, of course. Tabs settled with a wave of a hand, long periods spent interning without pay, trips to Bali, but now it seemed flagrant, undeniable. Its rude presence stood in the corner of the room like an ugly ornament there, but not quite as flagrant as the prospect of a baby. Now, I know you're talking about multiple things within that moment, but I do think noticing the sort of wealth divides in your friendship is such an interesting thing. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about your choice to explore that.
I mean, I'd say it's something that I felt myself. I hadn't didn't know John Lewis existed until I came to university. And I suppose university is the first time that a lot of people who went to comprehensive schools and had, normal backgrounds,
Hmm.
because most people in the UK do go to comprehensive school, and that is the norm. But you go to university and suddenly it doesn't feel like the norm anymore.
Yeah.
And you're kind of catapulted into this other world of quite significant wealth in some cases.
Hmm.
And it's an adjustment that has to be made. And, people ask you what school you went to and you're confused because why would they have heard of it, Or they ask you where you summer or what your father did for a living.
Mm.
It's just you kind of you're thrown out of your comfort zone in
Yeah.
quite a profound way. And I think, as Sophie describes, as you get older, particularly against the backdrop of increasing economic inequality in this country and the housing crisis,
Hmm.
you start to realize that you're even further apart than you thought you were, I suppose, initially.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
those differences become more and more stark.
Yeah.
And I think in Sophie's case, it's something that she's aware of, but she's never fully reckoned with because these women are also her friends.
Hmm.
And, you mustn't be envious, not class envy. You can't have class envy. So I think she keeps a lot of it inside, and it's an almost physical feeling of class struggle that I think
Mm.
she's experiencing. It's about, I suppose I was quite interested in exploring how economic deprivation can leave a mark on your body in some way, it's important as well to mention the fact that she's a carer or
Yeah.
was a carer for her sister and that her mother and father are still carers, her mother
Hmm.
particularly, and that can be a cause of great economic suffering as well.
Yeah.
So she's kind of facing multiple inequalities,
Hmm.
but is trying, they know she's different and she knows she's different, but she's not even trying to pass really. She's not pretending to be someone that she's not, but she's keeping an awful lot inside, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that when she sort of highlights her difference to them, that they do this really awkward thing of sort of like, I think especially, is it Iris?
Yeah,
Not a fan.
no.
But I think they very much kind of turn away, like it's too uncomfortable for them, even though she's the one that's dealing with the inequalities, they turn away from her. And I find that quite a common thing. I'm talking as a working class person from working class background. As I've got older, I've, been around friends that I thought were of a similar class background to me, and then maybe they've moved up a class as they've got older or married or, whatever, and their friendship groups I kind of don't feel a sort of kinship with. I feel, very different to them. And I
Mhm.
notice that sometimes they'll turn away, it's too uncomfortable for them to kind of see my struggles or, where I'm at in my life. I think that's a really weird thing that people do, and I don't really understand it.
Yeah, it's there's a very uncomfortable conversation in the book about an all-inclusive holiday.
That's it. Yeah, yeah,
Or like the kind of people that go on all-inclusive
yeah. Hmm.
holidays. And it really and that's like actually a conversation that I've experienced. So I was
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah. So I was like, I'm kind of having fun with it as well because, you do meet these people and they are clueless. And there's a simultaneous like thing that goes on, I think, particularly with the men, with the public school boys who've been educated only with other boys,
Hmm.
which is that they're simultaneously kind of intrigued by you and threatened by you and
Yeah.
freaked out by you. And that's a kind of dynamic that you see play out with Harry.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, I mean, it's something again that I think is underexplored in fiction.
It is. Yeah.
Because again, the people writing novels are often the people who have independent income in order to support themselves, and
Hmm.
they're not the kind of people that are able to really explore these dynamics because they
Hmm.
haven't felt them.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to explore that. And also because I work in an industry that can be quite elitist
Hmm.
and can be quite nepotistic.
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody's met an Iris. Iris is the great nepotist in the book
Hmm.
in some way or another. And I felt like people were kind of ready, not ready for her comeuppance, but ready for a bit of a reckoning when it comes
Mm.
to that dynamic.
Yeah. I won't give a spoiler, but I am toxic in the sense that I was glad with her
You're
comeuppance.
not the first person to say that.
I'll
And in a way,
leave.
it does comfort me because I was a bit worried, again, without giving spoilers, Sophie does not always behave in a way that is, what shall we say, considered socially acceptable.
Mm.
And so I was worried she'd lose the reader at that point and that the reader would go, well, that's just awful. She's behaving really badly here, which she is. She
Do
is
you know what
behaving
though?
really badly, but
I
you
also
understand her.
Yeah, but I also wonder if if that's a class thing as well, because for me, like I've seen so many scraps and so many like arguments. It's very like I don't know if it's more normalized in like
Yeah.
working class communities that it's just something that happens. Not to say that it's right, but it just seems to be a more like normalized thing. Whereas I think in more middle upper class communities, it doesn't tend to happen. And it's very much like, no, we just brush that under the carpet. We don't talk about that. We don't even, let it get to that point. So I found that
It's interesting,
interesting.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, altercations between girls.
Yeah.
If you've grown up in an environment where altercations between girls in the school playground, in the school
Hmm.
corridor, after school, outside the corner shop, on the bus,
Fights.
are just like the background to your life.
Yeah.
And then you go into this other environment where no one touches each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does that feel? And that was again something that I think you've articulated really well there. I wasn't thinking about consciously,
Hmm.
but subconsciously I was,
Yeah. Yeah.
because my school was pretty rough.
Yeah. Same.
It was common for you to see girls get physical with each
Hmm.
other as well as, yelling and swearing and spitting and all the other stuff.
Yeah. Oh my God, we were vile. Like, yeah, I was terrified. But no, I do think you explore class so wonderfully, and I could honestly talk to you about this book for hours. I loved it so much. I just want to say as well, before I ask you for a recommendation, this is really random, but what men are wanking in galleries?
Do you know what? I did an event a few years ago with, I won't name the person, but they work at a major institution.
Okay.
And they told me that wanking in galleries is a huge issue. And
I had no
that's where
idea.
that came from. Men wanking off to the paintings.
I actually can't
I'd
even.
love to I'd love to know in the age of like internet porn, like whether it's still happening to the same extent.
Yeah,
But this was only about, I don't know, 10 years ago or something,
it's
where she was
crazy.
like, yep, we're constantly having to remove men because they're masturbating. So that's a real thing.
Absolutely insane. Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me,
No,
sadly.
it's really strange. But
Yeah.
yeah, that moment couldn't get over it. I was like, as if this is, I don't know why it surprised me, but as if that's happening. Now, before I let you go, I do like to finish by asking for a recommendation, Rhiannon. So what would you like to recommend to the listeners?
Oh, well, I try and read a big classic every year,
Love that.
and I would like to recommend The Tenant of Wildfell
Oh,
Hall
I haven't heard of this.
by Anne Bronte. Because we're obviously seeing a fair bit about the Brontes at the
Yes, of
moment
course.
with
Yeah.
Wuthering Heights. And there's I'm always trying to make my way through all the costume dramas on BBC iPlayer as well. And they've got loads, and they have got The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which I'm about to
Oh,
start. So I can't recommend that. I don't know if it's any good. I've heard that it's good, but the book is just incredible. It's a real, like, still under the radar radical classic. It's a lot less gothic than Charlotte and Emily's work.
yeah.
It kind of has a gothic premise in that it's about this mysterious woman who turns up in this crumbling old hall and nobody knows who she is or where she's come from or why she doesn't have a man with her. It's just her and her child.
Hmm.
And without wanting to give too much away, it's an absolute feminist masterpiece, a kind of proto-feminist masterpiece. It's incredible.
I love that. I don't know why I've not come across that before.
I think she kind of got eclipsed by her sisters, and also
Yeah.
Charlotte was horribly embarrassed by it. It made me like Charlotte a lot less, actually, when
Yeah.
I read that. She was, because it was so transgressive
Hmm.
in Victorian times in terms of how this woman has sought her own independence, I suppose,
Mm.
outside of marriage. And people found that very threatening, and some of the reviews were very scathing.
Yeah.
And after Anne died, Charlotte basically tried to suppress it. And so, although in English literature departments people know about it, it's not really held up to the same standard as the other two.
No, it's not.
Because, well,
Yeah.
she's not as a writer, which is a shame. But
Yeah.
it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well, I'll
It's
be adding that to my
essentially about
TBR.
a. Oh, well, I won't give it away, actually. I was going to tell you what it's about, but I won't. I
No,
won't.
you can, you can.
Well, it's about an abusive relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
Um,
well, I definitely want to read that now because
yeah,
that's
it's
not,
incredible.
it's quite unusual for that period now.
Very unusual.
Yeah. Oh,
Very,
great.
very unusual.
Well, thank you for that recommendation. And listeners, my recommendation to you is that you grab yourselves a copy of Female Nude by the lovely Rhiannon, and I will be popping a link in the show notes to grab your copies. Where can the listeners find you online, if anywhere?
The best place is Instagram because I got rid of Twitter
Good for you.
because of Elon Musk.
Yeah,
So you can find me at Rhiannon Lucy Coslett.
amazing.
That's where I normally am.
Amazing. And listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on TikTok. We are also over on Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much, Rhiannon, for joining me today. I've absolutely loved chatting to you, and I, for the 100th time, loved this book, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for listening. Bye.